Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Fingers start shaking. I begin to run. Bullets start chasing. I begin to stop. We begin to wrestle. I was on the top. I want to thank you for letting me be myself again. Thank you for letting me be myself again.
It's Slide and the Family Stone on Tavis, Smiley, sounding good as ever. In this hour, two conversations as promised. On the backside of this hour, we told you yesterday we were going to try to get him on, and I'm grateful to say he'll be here at the bottom of the hour. The Reverend Dr. William Barber arrested yesterday inside the U.S. Capitol for protesting and praying against this Republican-led budget. I said earlier, I'll say again, quoting Dr. King, budgets are moral documents. Budgets are moral documents. And for protesting and praying inside the Capitol Rotunda yesterday, they were arrested and hauled off. We'll hear from Reverend Barber in his own words about what happened at the Capitol yesterday. But we commenced this hour in conversation with the CEO of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, our dear friend and brother, Dedrick Asante-Muhammad, who is going to compare the Reagan era to the Trump years, and we're going to wrestle with this question: what is the future of the black middle class, and how does black America navigate forward in spite of some pretty fierce opposition? I'm delighted once again to be in conversation with Dedrick Asante-Muhammad. How are you, sir?
Good to be on.
It's good to hear your voice, man. Glad to have you on. Let me just start with this. We've been talking about the 100 days. Everybody's talking about the 100 days. We just spent a part of our first hour talking about that. So before I get into the weeds here, into the details, let me just ask you, as it relates to black people in particular, black folk in particular, what's your read on these first 100 days, Dedrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been one of a lot of shock and awe. I think of a lot of movement, record levels of executive orders being put forward, of rhetoric around diversity, equity, inclusion that I think, many of us think are attacks upon us, though I see it oftentimes being broader than that and kind of used as a political term to attack any group that someone doesn't like. He just uses broad brush of attacking DEI. I do think it's interesting how little, people have noted he's done more executive orders than any other president ever, with like, I think 140 something. But he's also passed less legislation than anyone that's passed in his first 100 days since, I believe, Eisenhower. And so I'm wrestling with trying to understand what has truly changed and not get too caught up in the shock and awe campaign, which I think is part of his policy strategy. Just like with immigration, he really hasn't deported people at higher numbers than we've seen before, but his dramatic action, his I almost say violent and I don't know, inflammatory means of deportation have helped bring immigrants to this country at some of the lowest levels we've seen. So it's not even necessarily what was actually done, it was the way he's done it, which does have real effects. And so that's what I'm still wrestling with, in looking at these 100 days. I will note, though, it's still, as I wrote a piece, I talked to you about this before, about the best black economy in generations and why it isn't enough. African Americans still have pretty low unemployment rates, still from the last numbers I've seen, income levels. I think everyone's concerned about Trump's actions, tariffs, recession, the impact it could have. But I think it's important to note right now that we're not at a particularly weak condition economically at least right now.
Yeah, at least right now, that's the key phrase. I'm laughing, as I'm sure the audience is, because I say this all the time. I'm always fascinated how from 1 hour to the next, or one conversation to the next, the dots just connect. Here you hear Dedrick Asante-Muhammad echoing some of what we talked about in our first hour, that Trump is ruling by executive order, but not since Eisenhower has any president passed so little legislation in the first 100 days of his presidency. And I was saying a moment ago, Dedrick, in our first hour, that if the option is for Trump to continue this shock and awe and continue these 142 and counting executive orders that he signs every day, it seems, if that's the option versus passing legislation that really does, in fact, turn back the clock, or makes America great again, in air quotes, as he would put it, I'm going to take the executive orders over the legislation. Am I missing something here?
No, I'm in agreement. And I think, too, we're seeing, we're starting to see some of the limits of the executive orders. We're seeing how many of those are starting, to be held up, challenged in court.
That's right.
We're seeing that, his tariff war isn't officially an executive order. But we can also see that the actions being taken can have consequences he might not have seen at first, and is having to walk back. So I said this. I was at an Institute of Black World convening last Friday on Trump's first 100 days, and do think we've hit the apex of, well, and I'm hoping this to be true. We've hit the apex of the shock and awe campaign of the first 100 days, and now he's going to have to start dealing with reality, with courts, and with actual legislation, which is still I have great concerns about, because there is huge pieces of legislation, particularly the budget and tax policy, that I'm sure will be dealt with this year that could have long-term effects, which which have strong impact on the African American community.
Yep, as I said, we'll talk about the budget on the backside of this hour when we're joined by the Right Reverend William Barber, arrested yesterday in the Capitol Rotunda, protesting this Republican-led budget. When we come forward, though, with Dedrick Asante-Muhammad, I want to get into this conversation that we teed up about the Reagan era versus the Trump years. I've said before on this program any number of times, for those of you who listen every day, and hope that means you, and you. But I've said repeatedly that, to my mind, black people suffered miserably during the Reagan era. And that's my comparison, right? How much worse are things going to be after Trump 2.0 as compared to how bad things were for black people during the Reagan era? And I repeat once again, that we knew we were in trouble in the Reagan era when he went to Philadelphia, Mississippi, having left California to go all the way there where they murdered Goodman, Schroeder, and Cheney. To announce his presidency, you knew then that we were in for trouble. And indeed we were. And so we're going to let Dedrick Asante-Muhammad talk about the Reagan era and compare that to Trump's first 100 days. What lessons can be learned from Black America's black think tank? What can the Reagan era teach us about the Trump years and what may lie ahead for us? We black folk will do all that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
From California to the Carolinas, everybody's listening to Tavis. More when we come forward.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. Think about your mentors and idols, the people who inspire you the most. While it may look like they have all the answers, they don't. But they do know when to ask questions and seek the support they need. In a world that glorifies hyper-independence, it's easy to forget that we're all better with a support system. Therapy is a great way to find a consistent source of support in your life, so you can break free from the outdated belief that seeking help is a sign of weakness. BetterHelp has experienced therapists ready to help you with challenges ranging from anxiety and depression to relationships and stress. It's convenient, too. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. You can even send your therapist a message anytime something comes up. Build your support system with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/ABCRadio today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/ABC radio.
Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
You really about to do it?
40 acres and a mule. This is bigger than the music.
You really about to do it?
Yeah, they tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence.
Who among us doesn't like black music? But Kendrick is right. This moment is so much bigger than music. These are serious times. We've got serious problems, and we need serious people who understand that slogans are not solutions. When you want substantial and sober analysis about things that matter to you and the ones you love, this is where you turn. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black. When the flames subside, who ensures that the stories endure? At KBLA Talk 1580, we're committed to preserving the voices that shape our community. We know people have short memories, and as long as this Black Talk radio station is on the air, we will not let Altadena be forgotten. We are honored to announce that the Altadena Historical Society will officially archive our recent town hall, alongside every episode of Conversation Live, Altadena Rising with James Farr. This is the show of record, the definitive source for tracking Altadena's roots, resilience, recovery, and reunion. These stories will now live on for students, scholars, researchers, and journalists seeking truth and legacy in the months and years to come. Because history isn't just made, it's honored, it's recorded, and it's passed forward. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black. Made fresh daily in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and the CEO of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, Dedrick Asante-Muhammad. All right, Dedrick, talk to me about Ronald Reagan versus Donald Trump.
Yeah, I've been getting into history of the Joint Center. I've been president for about a year. Joint Center's been around 55 years, wanting to understand its legacy and trying to see what lessons I can learn for today. And as I was looking at the history, kind of going decade by decade, it really did remind me of the Reagan years. The Reagan years, 1980s, were the time of the great kind of pushback where, arguably from the mid 1950s, you had progressive legislation in terms of New Deal type of legislation, 30s, 40s, and then you started having civil rights legislation and Supreme Court rulings, 50s, 60s, and even kind of internal government policies in the 70s, even to the point where a conservative like Richard Nixon was trying to hold on to terms like Black Power, maybe make it into a capitalist call, still recognize and help create what would become the Office of Minority Business. So there was this kind of recognition of needing to deal with racial inequality. Reagan administration really pushed that back from when he was campaigning to actual legislation. And, you see a lot with the Supreme Court. It was actually during the Reagan years that the document that would eventually become Project 2025 would start in the 1980s with the Heritage Foundation as they were trying to figure out ways to take over government. And we saw under Reagan a massive pushback, a massive attempt to deconstruct the Civil Rights Department, an attempt to take down the Department of Education, and just really push back on so much of the progress that had been occurring. And we saw two very high levels of unemployment, around 20% unemployment, high levels for African Americans during that time, poverty rates of about 30%, the beginning of the kind of mass incarceration push. You could argue it went back to Nixon, but a greater development of that. So I think the Reagan years were years of great pushback against the progress made in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I think one challenge I have with the Trump administration is there's pushback to talk around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and some progress in that, like I said, Blacks are one of the strongest economic conditions we've been in our history. But there honestly wasn't radical substantive legal policy that was put forward, say, in the Biden administration, or even really arguably in the last 20 years. And so I think one of the challenges we're having now is we're having a pushback without the gains that at least occurred before the Reagan pushback.
Yeah. I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking specifically about your comment regarding Reagan and the Department of Education then versus Donald Trump and the Department of Education now, which leads to the obvious question: what do they have against the Department of Education? Why do they, whether you're Reagan or Trump, hate the Department of Education so much?
Well, and this all goes to a kind of a political ideology that I'm not really sure is, I don't think is at the center of Trump's thinking. I think it's more at the center of the party that Trump has taken control of. And so it keeps coming back. But groups like the Heritage Foundation have pushed consistently against any area where you see government in many ways positively impacting people's lives and having, and during the 80s and today have been an important place to provide access and resources to underprivileged people and to address some of the racial issues of the time. So, there's always been, when there was a New Deal and creation of Social Security and all of these things, even, federal regulations and all such things, there's always been a push by ideologues that big government is inherently bad, no matter what type of good it is doing for you and your community. Ideologically, they're opposed to it, so they're always ready to pounce. And I think the politician in Trump is trying to balance letting his anti-government ideologues get as much of the way as possible without turning off his populist grassroots base, which also enjoys things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and as I know you're going to be talking to Reverend Barber, are now on the chopping block, and Reverend Barber's taking a preemptive strike and bringing public awareness to this, which will be essential for over the next 6 months.
Yeah. Are there ways in which, Dedrick, the Reagan era can be, how might I put this, instructive and informative for us in this Trump moment? Are there lessons, are there takeaways from the Reagan era that we need to be mindful of that might help us be in better position whenever Trump leaves the White House?
Sure. Yeah. I gave 4 points in this op-ed I did about from the Reagan era to Trump's first 100 days. Mm-hmm. And, the first one was that backlash is predictable and so is resistance. I think, it is important to note, I think, everything is so hyperbolic in, television and news. People think, well, nothing like this has ever happened before. There's never been this type of pushback. Oh, no, there has been. And I think right now, Reagan's pushback and regressive policies have, we're still dealing with those today. So, we're much more powerful, much more influential. And so understanding we've been in this place before. And, as we've dealt with these things in the past, we've dealt with them by resistance, by organizing, by putting out the facts about what's really occurring, and by building political power, right? I think for people like yourself who are a political historian, the 80s was a regressive time, but it was also a time where we were building Black political elected power like we've never had before, mm-hmm. where Jesse Jackson ran his 1984 campaign, his 1988 campaign, which saw an increase in Black elected officials at every level, until the early 1990s, where you saw the strongest representation of Blacks in Congress. And actually, one thing I like to note to people is that the election that brought in Trump most recently is also the election that brought in more Black people in the House of Representatives, more Black senators, and more Black mayors across the country than ever before. So to not get lost in a simplistic narrative that everything's falling apart and there's nothing to do, no, we actually you can make progress in the midst of attack. And that is something, we need to continue to embrace and move forward on.
I'm glad you raised Reverend Jackson. I find myself saying to people from time to time in conversation about that era that nobody, and I do mean nobody, with all respect to Barack Obama and others we could list, ain't nobody ever had black coattails, political coattails like Jesse Jackson. I mean, what he did in 84 and what he did in 88 to get black folk elected all across this country is historic. There is nothing comparable to that era. And so we have I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, and to do that without winning the office. That's the amazing thing, right? He didn't win the office. He never had an office, but he still managed to pull people up all across the country and through also doing active voter registration. So I agree. And just as Reagan really defined the kind of regressive conservative agenda for the next 40 years, people don't give Reverend Jesse Jackson credit, but you listen to his 1988 a speech at the Democratic convention, and that really outlines the best of the progressive movements for the last 40 so years that progressives have been trying to garner, but still haven't been able to articulate as well as Reverend Jackson did in 1988.
Nope, and with all due respect to Bernie Sanders, nobody has ever laid down a progressive agenda and articulated it in the way that Reverend Jackson did. And I think he oftentimes does not get enough credit. And we know he's wrestling with Parkinson's. We know that each of us, as I say all the time, has to eventually do that dance with mortality, quoting my friend Cornel West. And yet he does not get the credit that he deserves. But again, nobody's ever had political coattails in black America quite like Jesse Jackson. Speaking of Ronald Reagan, Jesse's had so many great lines in speeches over the course of his illustrious career. But one of my favorites is still, I'd rather have Roosevelt in a wheelchair than Reagan on a horse. That's a cold line, y'all. I'd rather have Roosevelt in a wheelchair than Reagan on a horse. That's the Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson Sr. Love him, love him, love him. The other thing that's concerning me these days, Dietrich, as we talk about the first 100 days of Donald Trump, is that there's no debate about this. The data, I think, is incontrovertible, and you know this stuff better than I do, being the scholar that you are. The black middle class has been largely shaped by federal work. And now, so many of these federal workers being laid off happen to be African American. I don't know what that means, what that portends for the future. You said earlier that at the moment, economically speaking, we're still okay at the moment. We're not losing significant ground as yet. And yet, I'm wrestling with, again, this notion that the black middle class largely exists because of federal work, and Trump is sending black people home every day. I don't know how to read that.
Yeah, well, and I think, and it's the data isn't clear yet either as to having a strong understanding of what percentage of the workforce that is being let go are African Americans. How easy it is for them to get back into the workforce. It takes time, and that's always challenging. But what I'll put forward is that one of the most important things about federal government and its setting the roots for the black middle class was it wasn't just because I think it's only about maybe 8% of black Americans work in government, whether that's federal, state, or local. But the importance of it is that they created, and they were the leaders in creating space to integrate blacks into the workforce, to creating anti-discrimination laws and regulations that then the private sector would slowly come behind. I think we always want to say the private sector leads in everything. Well, no, it was government that has led in really anti-discrimination, inclusion, bringing people in. And this is one of the concerns, is this move not just let's say they cut by the end of the year 400,000 jobs by the end of the year, and maybe 20% of them are African Americans, but are these cuts something that will be reflected and followed in the private sector? And we're seeing, private sector was the first to jump on board and say, yeah, we're going to get rid of DEI too. Mm-hmm. We're going to cut all of these programs. And is this a long-term thing that's actually going to affect their hiring policies? Because, to be fair, the corporate embrace of DEI oftentimes was taking a group of some money that they might have called community engagement, and then putting a new name on it and saying DEI and say, look, we have a whole new initiative here, without very much changing at the corporate level. So if that happens in reverse, that won't have a dramatic actual effect. But if they really do start changing practices that make their oftentimes weak employment and inclusion of black people at the high level of corporate America even worse, and at the mass level, that could be challenging. Though honestly, I am more concerned about the budget implications, the kind of tax policies going to come up, and the fact that we might go into recession that could have much more of a dramatic effect on Black economic well-being than the debates around what you call, what is called DEI.
That's why "as yet" is the operative phrase.
Yes, sir.
As yet, we will see what the coming months and years brings on in this iteration of the Trump administration. The second time around. Let me close. I got 2 minutes left. Let me close with this. Back to the point you made again earlier, that at the moment, as yet, Black people are still holding on economically, and no evidence at the moment that we've lost significant ground. Again, we'll see what happens in the months to come. But what does concern me is this all-out effort to rewrite the Black narrative, to rewrite the narrative of our contributions to this country. So we may be economically speaking okay at the moment, but what does it mean if they rewrite the entire narrative of our contributions to this country? Quoting Du Bois, would America have been America without her Negro people? Dedrick?
No, it would not, and it could have been not. And I think America has always wrestled with recognizing Black people, not just because of a dislike toward Black people, but because it challenges a narrative that America was created just about freedom and democracy and everybody doing well. It's hard to have that narrative when you're recognizing that there was mass enslavement, which created so much wealth that helped develop the economy. So I think the country has always been wrestling with that. And now we're seeing some of the most crude ways where it's trying to, in different spaces, outright erase some of the history that has been permitted to be talked about publicly of deep racial inequality, white supremacist policies that were at the foundation as the country has always struggled to be a true democracy and move away from that past, and this is what we're living. This is what we were living in under the Biden administration. This is what we're living in the Trump administration. And I've been talking to different leaders of different organizations and noting that it's so essential at this moment for Black institutions to come together and highlight this is, why it's so important to have Black institutions. We want all institutions to have, inclusive policies and inclusive history, but this is the moment where Black institutions have to stand up and say, we're going to continue to put forth the history and advocate for our communities in a way that no other institution historically has been willing to do.
He is Dedrick Asante-Muhammad. He is the CEO of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And I'm always grateful to have him on this program to share his particular insights. Dedrick, thank you for your time. We'll do it again, my friend.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. And tell Reverend Barber that his Muslim friend, former colleague in the NAACP, says keep on the good fight.
He may be listening right now. He's about to come up when we come forward on Tavis Smiley. So if he didn't hear it, I'll tell him you're listening to Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. The state trial of 3 former Memphis, Tennessee police officers charged in the beating death of Tyree Nichols continues today. Yesterday, Nichols' mother, Rovon Wells, took the stand and described the moment a doctor told her that her son was dead.
I just lost it. I dropped the phone and I lost it.
The trial is expected to last for up to 2 weeks. Millions of people are under threat of severe weather today from Texas to New York. The storms could bring large hail, heavy wind gusts, and possible tornadoes. Black Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Police Superintendent Larry Snelling are hesitant about snap curfews to curb teen takeovers. Snelling said the plan isn't complete and must be constitutionally sound. A city council vote is possible next month. And the first trailer for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's UFC film is out now. He stars as 2-time UFC heavyweight champ Mark Kerr in A24's The Smashing Machine. The film will hit theaters on October 3rd. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
If you're ready for a new job, let Express Employment Professionals help you. Express is already hiring for summer jobs in a variety of industries. Job seekers never pay a fee at Express. Go to expresspros.com to find your location. That's expresspros.com.
Joe Buck and John Smoltz welcoming you back to the City Center Convenience Mart. Uh-oh. She's looking at the cigarettes, but she just grabs the gum off the counter. Stand Up to Cancer and Rally want you to reduce your risk for cancer. Go to takeahealthystand.org. Is this the
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Critical game for the Clippers tonight in Denver. It's Game 5 of their first-round series against the Nuggets. The series is tied at 2 games apiece in the best of 7. Clippers coach Ty Lue needs to come up with something in his game plan to deal with Nuggets center Nikola Jokic. In the 4 games, Jokic is averaging a triple-double, 28.5 points, 13.5 rebounds, and 10.8 assists. The Clippers have no players on their injury list, which means Kawhi Leonard is healthy. The Clippers will not get past the Nuggets without Leonard. Leonard has been brilliant in the series, averaging 26 points and shooting 56%. 7 p.m. tip-off tonight on TNT. Shaquille O'Neal has agreed to become the general manager at Sacramento State University. Shaq will help run the school's men's basketball program. Shaq's son Shakir transferred to Sac State from HBCU Florida A&M. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. With so many shows on our station weekdays and weekends, it's hard for me to keep track of all the guests who are actually in studio on any given day. I wish I'd known in advance that LADA Nathan Hochman was coming in studio for a recent interview. Had I known, I would have loved to have personally greeted him and then asked him why LA City Council member Curran Price is being criminally prosecuted for allegations of misconduct similar to the conflict of interest violations for which former City Council member Kevin De Leon is only being fined. What's that about, Mr. DA? In fairness to Mr. Hochman, it was former DA George Gascon who actually filed felony charges against Councilman Price. I opined then on how these criminal charges against Price did not pass the smell test. I was concerned then that this was yet another wayward prosecution of a high-profile black elected, not to mention a waste of taxpayer money. I am even more convinced now that this is a hot mess. To be clear, neither you or I want a bunch of self-serving, greedy, conflict of interest criminals managing the people's business inside LA City Hall. But we also don't want selective or targeted prosecution of black politicians. We've seen that movie before, and we don't need a sequel. It's hard to watch Kevin De Leon get away with paying an $18,000 fine for repeated ethics violations, what he calls an oversight, and at the same time, watch the DA's office continue its criminal prosecution of Curran Price for issues allegedly involving his wife's clients. Motions, I might add, that were passed unanimously by the LA City Councilman. What are you saying, Tavis? I'm glad you asked. DA Hochman did not start this inquisition, but he certainly has the power to stop it. I have said it before, and I will say it again. Fundamental fairness. In the absence of fundamental fairness, we experience a cascade of deteriorating conditions. The erosion of trust, the weakening of social cohesion, alienation, marginalization, the legitimacy of authority diminishes, cynicism and disengagement grow, and ultimately, people abandon civic participation altogether. Fundamental fairness, Mr. Hochman. That's all we ask. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. As always, we welcome your feedback.
Progressive Home Quote Explorer lets you easily compare rates, so shopping for insurance might be the easiest part of owning a home. Definitely easier than this.
Psst, honey. Honey! What? Shh, there's a salesman walking up the driveway.
Oh no, he's got a clipboard.
What do we do?
Get down.
Down?
On the floor, you...
Shh. Shoot, did he see us? Why are you breathing so loud?
Home ownership isn't easy, but with Progressive's Home Quote Explorer, shopping for home insurance is. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and third-party insurers. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Earlier on today's program, we played some audio of the Right Reverend Dr. William Barber on the steps of the Supreme Court yesterday. When he left the Supreme Court, they marched to the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, and that's where all the drama went down. And so now, a conversation with the Right Reverend Dr. William Barber, who, along with other faith leaders, was arrested yesterday in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda after praying and protesting against the draconian Republican-led budget. While the arrest of protesters at the Capitol is not at all unusual, the response to Reverend Barber's prayer, I think it's fair to say, was unusually dramatic. After issuing verbal warnings, dozens of Capitol Police expelled everyone in the Rotunda, including credentialed press. If you heard my show yesterday, you heard my colleague and our White House correspondent, Dr. Nicolai Corte, who called into this program live after he was pushed out of the Rotunda by Capitol Police. I'm told the Reverend Barber, who is disabled and walks with two canes, was hand-tied, handcuffed, not even allowed to access his canes as he was escorted into police custody. But that's what I heard. Now I want to hear from Reverend Barber what really went down. Reverend Barber, good to have you back on this program, my friend. How are you, for starters?
All is well. All is well. We're standing and we're speaking and we're strong and we're glad that you're where you are doing what you do and keeping the truth out there, Brother Tavis.
Yeah, just doing the best we can, brother. But you're the one on the front line, and I am grateful for you being there. Tell me about yesterday. What happened?
Well, we launched, first of all, Moral Monday in D.C. and at the Capitol. We actually started on Ash Wednesday. We started looking at this budget, and we got the Institute for Policy Study and the Economic Policy Group to do a deep dive on what's really happening with this budget that so many people are not paying attention to. Mm-hmm. And Tavis, what we found is we're talking about a budget that could be, number one, it'll be for 10 years. Number two, it cuts $2 trillion from the budget, which means you can't do it without attacking Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and blocking living wages and doing things of that nature. And that it very well could be because the Congress, the House particularly, they're trying to use the resolution process, which means they only have to get 51 votes. So here we are, and it could impact. Let me give you some numbers before I talk about exactly what happened. If this budget goes through, it would cut $800 billion from Medicaid, $800 billion. That means that it would cut 36 million of the 71 million people on Medicaid would be impacted. You're talking about disabled people. You're talking about children. You're talking about older people. You're talking about people in nursing homes. You're talking about rural hospitals that will be undermined because of the lack of funding. And you're talking about black people. 11 million black people are in that 70-some million. 11 million, 19% of the total of Medicaid. And if it happens, it could devastate this country. Now, we went in on yesterday. We had clergy from 8 different denominations to launch Moral Monday. We had impacted people. We had the National Urban League that has thrown itself behind this effort to build Moral Monday in D.C. We had impacted people there, federal workers. We had Tavis. We had persons who would who need Medicaid, and they spoke as well. Mm-hmm. We then proceeded into the Capitol. When we got into the Capitol, a group of us went into Rotunda to pray a prayer. The prayer. That's all we did was praying a prayer, but the prayer was focused on the budget and how wrongful it is, how sinful it is, how unconstitutional it is, how economically insane it is. After 3 warnings, the police came to us. They put everybody out, which was strange to us, everybody out, even the media, mm-hmm. and they put us under arrest. Now, I did have my canes, and they were cordial, but they still put handcuffs on us. And which meant for me having to take 2 canes, make it in one hand, and just figure out another way to walk, down through. They did offer a wheelchair, but that kind of thing, that what they had doesn't work for me. But here's the point. On that same day, Trump had initiated something saying he wanted to root out anti-Christian things in the federal government. Well, what's more anti-Christian than cutting health care?
Mm-hmm.
What's more anti-Christian than passing a budget that would cut millions of people, children, from free and reduced lunch? What's more anti-Christian than a budget that says that people making $7.25 an hour make enough, and it may be too much, and we don't need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage? So they arrested us in that rotunda, and let me say this: where we were standing. We were standing in front of the statue. First, there's Rosa Parks.
Yep.
But then there's another statue of the suffragists.
Mm-hmm.
And on that statue, one of the sculptures is unfinished to represent all of the women that have stood down through the years. And on yesterday, our focus was on how this budget will devastate the lives of women and children and workers. That's what we were focused on. That's where we stood. And after praying for about 15 minutes, we found ourselves arrested and taken off to jail.
Yep. How did you process in that moment being preyed on? That's Preyed, being preyed on while y'all were praying.
Yeah. Well, I processed it by saying that's what's happening in our legislature, our Congress right now. Yeah, and I'm not naive to say it hadn't happened under other Congresses too, but in this moment, it's happening with extraordinary speed and extraordinary strategy. Bannon had said that they wanted the president to do 100 days of thunder, and while that's happening, they're distracting everybody. They wanted to focus on getting a hold of the $5 trillion budget, giving $2 trillion tax cuts to the wealth and the greedy, and then dismantling what they call the administrative state. So what I thought about was how every day they opened the House with prayer, P-R-A-Y, but then pray, P-R-E-Y, on the very people that if you are a true prayer under God, you should not be doing it. The Tavis always got a text for you. Text Isaiah 10, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make women and children their prey, P-R-E-Y. And that's exactly what's happening. And then lastly, I processed it by saying, how many people's lives will be arrested with pain and will be arrested by more disability, will be arrested by death? Because in this budget, everything they attempt to do has a death measurement. For every 500,000 people denied health care, and we're in a country where we have 87 million people who are either uninsured or underinsured. We're the only of the wealthiest countries in the world that doesn't offer some form of universal health care. But for every 500,000 people denied health care, about 2,500 people die. And so this budget is not benign. It's a budget full of destruction, disability, and death. And we've got to wake the American people up. We've got to wake black people up and brown people up and everybody up, because it is important. I understand challenging corporate America. I've done that. You ought to do it. There's a place for that. But give you the comparison. Target has 400,000 workers, but this budget will knock 36 million people off of health care. Target has 400,000 workers, but if this budget goes through, it will kick 7 million black people off of Medicaid. We cannot be, we may be able to do both at the same time, but we can't do one and leave out the other.
No, that's sobering analysis. That is sobering analysis. When we come forward, I want to give Reverend Barber a chance to unpack what King said about budgets. Dr. King said that budgets are moral documents. Budgets are moral documents. I wonder, in that frame, how Reverend Barber views this particular budget. For that matter, how Dr. King might view this particular budget, given that budgets are moral documents. More with Reverend Barber when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Generous listening. Charitable listening. It's why everybody wants to talk to Tavis. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Robinhood Gold members can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on annual retirement contributions. With Robinhood Gold, the perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive a 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month. If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. LA County's new Justice Care and Opportunities Department, or JCOD, is here to support justice-involved individuals and their families. The JCOD Support Center is now taking calls at 1-833-LACJCOD. That's 1-833-522-5263. Available 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., the Support Center is your one-stop shop for re-entry issues and court support. They offer court reminders, connections to local services, transportation assistance for housing, court appearances, and childcare. The JCOD hotline provides personalized help to connect you with services that you need. And don't forget to check out justiceconnect.org for more information. Remember, it's free and available every day at 1-833-522-5263. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in, but we're okay with that. You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed with the Right Reverend Dr. William Barber. I recall, Reverend Barber, when you started these Moral Mondays down in North Carolina, and I am mindful of the fact that Donald Trump has the overwhelming support of the so-called moral majority. But King said that budgets are moral documents. There's a disconnect somewhere here. There's some cognitive dissonance here. Can you explain it to me?
Well, Trump has, yes, certainly the support. I think 45% of his base was the so-called religious nationalists. Mm-hmm. Now, whether they're moral or not is a whole nother issue. Because if you ever notice, Tavis, they don't have I mean, that's another issue.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Have you ever noticed they never say, well, this is what Jesus said? They got a Jesus problem, they have a Holy Spirit problem, and they have a Bible problem. But they use the name religion, but they never will talk about it being a form of Christian thought. They try to, but it just doesn't fly. They can't find Jesus anywhere in their document. So what it is an age-old kind of hypocrisy, slave master religion. I mean, it's heresy right in front of us. And they're losing members. They're losing young folk, and others data tell us that they're losing members. Part of the issue so much when it comes to Trump and him getting elected is not who voted for him, but who stayed home. Mm-hmm. The 30% of people that stayed home, the millions of people that stayed home for whatever reason. But here's the other issue. King said, moral issue. The Bible says you don't have to wonder where a person's heart is. Just follow the money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because where your treasure is, that's where your heart is.
That's it.
So let's look at this budget and see where their heart is. This budget, if you go through it, seeks to codify into law all of the things that Musk has done with DOGE. Where is your heart?
Mm-hmm.
This budget says if you make $7.25 an hour or $15,000 a year, that's enough. You're not poor. if you make $16,000 a year, you're not poor and you don't need any rate. Where's your heart? This budget will affect 10 million people with disability on Medicaid and millions of adults and hospitals. This budget will cut 24 million children from free and reduced lunch. Everywhere you look on this budget, you cannot find any place where it lines up with the words of Jesus. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was an immigrant, did you welcome me? Or nowhere will you find it lines up with the prophets. So what you have is this budget clearly tells folk that those who are purporting it and pushing it, what they care most about is how they can give $2 trillion of tax cuts to the greedy. And what they don't care about are the people in this community, in this country, whoever they are, who are sick, who are low wage, who are in public education. They just do not care because the budget exposes that. And the other thing King was basing that on is it says the love of money is the root
of all evil.
My grandmama said the root.
Yeah, the root.
Because grandmama said when you love money, you got a root and a root. She said it's rooted in evil, and the root puts a rut on you. Now, anybody from down south, Louisiana and North Carolina south, you know what a rut is.
Yes,
you know what a root is. And so really the love of money puts a rut on you, a root on you, because think about this, Tavis. What mythology, what's going on in your mind when you have power and all you can do when you get up in the morning is think about how many people's health care can I take today? How many poor people can I keep poor today? How many people's labor rights can I? What mythology is going on inside of you? And then to think that if you do this, it's just going to hurt black and brown people, when the majority of the people it's going to hurt are actually going to be poor, low-wage white people.
When we come forward in our remaining moments with Reverend Barber, I want to ask him, obviously we will never know, but I wonder how different this moment might be. King was organizing the poor. Reverend Barber has picked that mantle up, organizing the poor. I wonder how different this moment might be, or whether, in fact, we would even be in this moment if the Democrats had talked less about the so-called middle class and organized the poor. That's the exit question for Reverend Barber when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Why does Tavis say when we come forward? Because he's not going back. And you don't have to go back either. Forward ever, backward never. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Replace stop, opt out. Consult a doctor prior to use.
Wow, you look amazing. What have you been doing?
I'm sure you've heard of Ozempic, Wegovy, and the other GLP-1 medications, right? Well, I found this great company called Zelty. If you qualify, their providers can prescribe medications like Ozempic and Wegovy and other GLP-1 medications that are 80 to 90% less expensive, all 100% online.
I can get GLP-1 medications for 80 to 90% less and do it all online? No doctor's office or pharmacy?
Yes, Zelty can provide semaglutide or tirzepatide, the active ingredients in Ozempic and other expensive GLP-1s, but for 80 to 90% less and shipped directly to your door.
How do I get started with Zelty?
Just send them a text.
Text SKINNY to 323232 to get started today with Zelty. Get the same active ingredients in Wegovy or Ozempic, but for 80 to 90% less and 100% online. Don't wait. Text SKINNY to 323232 right now for a link to your exclusive offer. Text SKINNY to 323232. That's SKINNY to 323232. SKINNY to 323232.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more, all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada, member FDIC.
Lena Bloom for the Bail Project. Imagine you're stuck in a jail cell and you can't afford bail, and someone offers you a way out. Just plead guilty, and you can go home and kiss your kids goodnight. What do you do? What thousands have. You plead guilty whether you are or not. Cash bail makes poverty a crime. That's why the Bail Project helps those who can't afford it while fighting to end cash bail. Because freedom should be free.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Thanks for calling Discover. This is Nia.
Hi, Nia. It's Jennifer. Did you know that Discover automatically doubles all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year?
Yeah, I work here.
Okay. I was just double checking. Get it?
Because Discover automatically doubles all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year?
Oh, you get me, Nia.
You could say that I double get you.
I guess we've taken it too far.
You earn, we match. Discover Cashback Match. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Freedom is an endless meeting. So let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
I've got 3 minutes left, and I want to yield the balance of my time to the Right Reverend Dr. William Barber to address this question. How might this moment be different? Would we even be in this moment if Democrats had talked less about the so-called middle class and organized the poor?
No, we would not be in this moment. We would not be in the moments we have been in. And in fact, if people want to learn more about that, Tavis, have them text MORAL for 32846. Here's the facts. The greatest, most potential voting bloc in this country for expansion are the 30 million poor and low-wage infrequent voters. There's not a battleground state where poor and low-wage voters now represent under 36% of the electorate. In Pennsylvania and North Carolina alone, if you had just mobilized 12 to 15% of poor and low-wage voters that did not vote, those and they had voted an agenda, they would have transformed the elections in those areas. In all of the battleground states that Trump won, so-called battleground states he won, just the 12% increase in the number of poor and low-wage voters could have actually turned that in a different way. But poor and low-wage people have said time and time again, nobody talks to them. Nobody talks to them. Nobody speaks their language. Nobody says, if we get elected, this is what we're actually going to do. 70% lastly of Americans want a raise in living wage. Democrats did not make that a central part of their campaigning. And it was a travesty that we didn't. Yeah. And I'm independent, but I will tell you, and I will say it on your show, and I mean this prophetically. If America does not get serious about the stones that the builders rejected becoming the cornerstones of a new political reality in this country, God help us. Because authoritarianism and demagoguery and wannabe dictators will rule and rule and rule as long as we ignore the rejected stones. That's the only group that can save this country.
I got 30 seconds left. Will the moral Moral Mondays continue in Washington?
Oh yes. You know, we started with 17 people in April 28th was actually the anniversary of 2013. We started with 17 people. In 7 months, it was 80,000 people showing up, and some 2,000 people have been arrested. And I won't get into all of the change that it made in North Carolina. We'll talk about that later. Sure. But yesterday was the inauguration. We are a resurrection and not an insurrection, and we intend to be right there.
A resurrection, not an insurrection. I love Bishop Barber. And if the moral majorities in Washington come anywhere near the success of the moral Mondays, too many morals here. If the moral Mondays in Washington come anywhere near the success of the moral Mondays in North Carolina, this story is going to grow. It has legs. We'll be talking about it. The national media will get focused on it. If they come anywhere near the success in Washington that they had in North Carolina when these moral Mondays kicked off under the leadership of the Right Reverend Dr. William Barber. Reverend Barber, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful to God that you are well, my friend, that you're okay. And thank you for coming on this program so quickly.
Love you, my friend. Take care.
Love you back, man. Stay strong. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. The state trial of 3 former Memphis, Tennessee police officers charged in the beating death of Tyree Nichols continues today. Yesterday, Nichols'